Yes, hello from the High Peaks Wilderness. I bid you all good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be across the nation around the world. My name is Leah Prime, and this is the Invisible Night School. For those of you just joining us, the Invisible Night School is a small consortium of lay researchers and scholars pursuing the study and exploration of ufology, high strangeness, and the phenomenon. INS is not a monolith. We represent varied ideas, backgrounds, disciplines, and experiences, and seek to engage in good faith dialogue with other curious minds. Tonight we are having one of our long-awaited Open Lines episodes. Basically how this works is we'll be sharing out the Streamyard link. I've posted it in the chat, in the YouTube chat right now. Feel free to jump on this stream. It's totally cool if you only want to join with audio. You don't have to join on video. The only rule is don't be a jerk. This is not a democracy. This is a benevolent dictatorship. And if you're a jerk, I'm kicking you off my show, and we're all going to talk shit about you in the green room after. So don't be like that. Anyway, without any further delay, I am delighted to welcome my co-hosts on this evening. Of course, I have Lewis. How are you, friend?
Good. How are you?
Oh, it's just another day in paradise. I have Campbell.
Hello, how are you?
Oh,
you already said, but yes.
Good and doing better. I'm going to break out all the things I say when I'm on client calls and work calls to talk about how good I am. And of course, our resident dubious layman, who is so lovingly missed from Twitter right now, Nick.
Hey, Leah,
Hi.
How are you doing?
Better than I deserve.
Nice.
I have probably close to 20 of these little business bro responses that I've picked up in my slow jaunt through venture capital the last few years.
It's a necessary talent.
It is. I've become very good at it. So yeah, today was an eventful day, right? It's Bicycle Day, right? The 80th anniversary of the LSD trip that was enjoyed by Albert Hoffman.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
No, I'm serious.
I'm into it, but I don't know about this.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so obviously 420, the International Cannabis Holiday. But yeah, 419, Bicycle Day. This is the day that Albert Hoffman took his 250 microgram dose of LSD 80 years ago. And subsequently went on to change the world. If anyone hasn't read it, his book LSD, My Problem Child, is a really interesting exploration of both his experiences with LSD and sort of his reflections on basically introducing this substance to the population. He was at Sandow's laboratories at that time. And so this is generally celebrated among the psychonauts as being something of a international holiday.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I had actually just read a paper by Eric Davis, not the one from UFO stuff, from consciousness stuff. And he's talking about how like Foucault went to California in the 70s and was like doing LSD and changed his perspective on a lot of his philosophy. And I'd never heard that. And I took a philosophy major. I knew who Foucault was, but There's so much going on in the psychedelic space that's sort of completely separated from everything else.
Yes. Actually, there's a wonderful article, I believe it was in the Baffler a couple years ago, basically about Foucault doing LSD in Death Valley, California. Highly recommended reading for anyone who's interested in sort of psychonaut literature. And I also want to pump Eric Davis, not UFO Eric Davis, but the other Eric Davis, who wrote High Weirdness, Technosis, and oh man, he wrote something else. He's great though. He's written a lot basically on high strangeness, weirdness. Actually, UFO culture, his book High Weirdness talks a lot about emergent psychedelic and ufology and spirituality and new age stuff in the 70s and how it's come on to shape kind of counterculture now. Definitely recommended reading.
I'd love to get him on here, maybe. Yeah, that's great.
Dude, I would love to have him on. You would just all watch me fangirl and fawn for 2 hours.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. And besides that, it was an eventful day in the UFO world, right? We had the hearings today, the long-awaited, much-anticipated hearings that seemed, as they are wont to do, to collectively piss off all of UFO Twitter for many, many reasons, I'm sure. What did you guys think? Who tuned in and watched any of it?
Well, hold on. Since I don't know, what is the kind of general consensus on UFO Twitter right now?
So I've seen a number of push responses. The first was basically that people felt that what's his name, Sean Kirkpatrick, was cagey, or either he personally was being cagey, or I've heard speculation, of course, that he was being stymied, deliberately stymied. The impression seems to be that he is not finding the collaboration from external departments that he has been seeking in his work, in his position.
Okay. I mean, that's understandable. We spoke earlier. I said I was watching on double speed, so he definitely did look cagey to me. But I think that was more of a symptom of the speed I was watching at. I thought, that I didn't take much away from this hearing. You know what I mean? It was more, we have a large majority that are reported that are mundane things. I think he said the majority of reports that Arrow receives are of mundane characteristics, much like a balloon or quadcopter, things like that, which we were saying earlier, I think really speaks to the fact of how easily and how frequently these, what we call trained observers, do misidentify things in the air. It apparently happens a lot. And I think I also said most ufologists will agree with that most UFO cases are misidentifications or hoaxes. But again, I think that really speaks to the fact that how easy it is to misidentify these things. And genuinely believe you're seeing something anomalous and report it. Obviously, you wouldn't report it otherwise, but it just goes to show you.
Yeah, well, from the start with, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, he ended up saying there's a 5% residual of cases that he thinks are unexplained. Well, I don't know about unexplainable, but unexplained, and maybe defy conventional explanation. What I think is interesting about the way the government has communicated on the UFO subject in recent years is that they've actually started leaving sort of more ambiguity than they used to, in a way that I find almost, in some respects it could be seen as troubling, because their own internal documents that have been declassified through legitimate processes suggest they don't really want people to be sort of believing in conspiracy and things like that. So they want to be as unambiguous as possible. So today, Dr. Kirkpatrick did use language he was saying, a vast majority. But, you could go into the most extreme fringes of UFO, study, and people who believe that it's the most extreme possibility out there would say this is the same thing.
I actually have two things to say. The first is that when it comes to the reliability of trained observers, the analogy that comes to mind is the difference between studying a foreign language in a classroom or academic setting and actually functionally using that language in a lived experience. And I bring this up because I think that there's a lot of noise and context and complexity to, even as a trained observer, appropriately identifying things in one's environment that can be that can present circumstances and environmental factors that may not frequently exist, right? Even just like atmospheric phenomena or weather phenomena or someone being tired, things like that. And this doesn't necessarily make trained observers useless at all. It just makes them fallible, right? And human beings, even very well trained human beings, are fallible. This is why airplanes have pilots and co-pilots, because you frequently need another skilled or trained person in the event, not only of an issue, but also basically as a second individual to contribute judgment and assess circumstances. And this is also something, I mean, to note here, this is something that human brains are still extremely, extremely good at compared to artificial intelligence and classification. We're very good at making decisions in complex circumstances and complex environments. And it feels to me like when we're relying on just one individual trained observer to categorically make an assessment about something that may be anomalous, that's an undue amount of pressure or stress or reliance on basically like the fallibility of human cognition and human recognition. I don't know too much about how this training is done, or if there's basically like the equivalent of like pair programming where you have two people watching stuff to corroborate. But I do think it's important to say that like fallibility in this circumstance is just an artifact of human fallibility. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a hoax or there's malicious intent.
J. Allen Hynek actually even said that military pilots make relatively poor judges of poor observers because they're kind of oriented towards seeing things as a threat and responding quickly. And so the Soviets actually did their own study, and they came to a similar conclusion. Because like a lot of their pilots were all of their military was basically told to act as like a giant UFO reporting apparatus. And so they had a lot of data to work with, but they did like some follow-on studies, and they found that military pilots were often misidentifying like meteorites and celestial or atmospheric phenomena. So yeah, that sort of recapitulated the Hynek assessment.
Well, in aviation in general, redundancy is seen as critical, and being a professional involves knowing that redundancy is critical. Like, I don't get into a Boeing because it has the best engine. I get into it because it has 4 of the best engines, and the likelihood of them all failing is very low. But the Boeing engineers know that there's a chance of any one of them failing. So, there's always the probability or certainty of error built into systems, and it does show sort of the underlying bias when you kind of erase that. I think it should be emphasized by somebody who wants to actually sort of get at the real truth.
Are any of you guys familiar with heuristics for filtering out misidentifications and separating them from what is believed to be truly anomalous phenomena? Like criteria or
the 5 observables, Leah. What do you mean?
Right.
Sorry, remember, I'm from the psycho-spiritual consciousness lens.
Yeah, well, it's worth looking at those though, because like when I've gotten into the looking at the UFO cases, the nature of the 5 observables don't even necessarily add up to me as being consistent with what could be like a real UFO or whatever. Like, it's not necessary that it demonstrate essentially any of them. And Elizondo says he's not a UFO guy, the former director of the not the Pentagon brand, whatever. Anyway, we know who Elizondo is. He says that he doesn't know about UFO stuff, but then he's putting these things out there. I get the sense that he just sort of came up with them on the fly.
Yeah, so for the edification of both myself and our audience, the 5 observables can be categorized as follows. This is according to thestars.media, well-known institution of intellectual and atmospheric phenomena. The first is sudden and instantaneous acceleration. The second, hypersonic velocities without signatures. So signatures in this instance are characterized as acoustic heat or electromagnetic basically aftermaths. Then low observability. So descriptions by witnesses are difficult to describe. Electronic equipment associated with observing the phenomena becomes jammed or doesn't register what's actually being seen. Transmedium travel. So this would be the ability to travel easily in various environments and conditions. And then finally, positive lift, objects that are apparently resisting the natural effects of Earth's gravity, which is kind of interesting. A lot of these feel like there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram of these traits.
I like that low observability is one of them. It's kind of interesting.
It's like implicit.
It's a
to
good
any...
cover your ass kind of keep it nice and ambiguous.
Very weird.
Yeah, it's kind of like a snake eating its own tail there, where it's like a UFO is something that is hard to resolve. It's like, yes, and
Dude, I like V's comment here that the 5 observables for Leah are 5 of the 7 chakras. Okay, so first of all, there's a lot more than 7 chakras. There's a lot of chakras, not just the 7 that we know of through the Western yoga schools. And that's all I'll say about that, because this is Open Lines, not Leah's Woology Hour.
It is Open Lines.
It is Open Lines.
We
don't have anyone in the green room right now, but I'm going to throw the Streamyard link in. Obviously, any of our audience members, feel free to drop in. We'd love to talk to you guys, especially if you have thoughts about the hearings today. If you have any cases you want to discuss, even just anything about high strangeness. The point of Open Lines, of course, is unscreened. Anyone can jump on and contribute. So let me go ahead and drop that link in here.
Yeah, well, I'd like to hear about just whatever. I would enjoy if maybe someone from the believer perspective would call in and tell me their opinion on the hearings. I want to see what other people thought of that too.
Yeah, I would love that.
I have my own biases, of course. So I'd like to hear other perspectives.
Yeah, and I've got the live briefing here, so maybe I'll do a presentation and share that tab, and we can take a look at this chart that Dr. Kirkpatrick put up on the thing. Okay, that'll just take me a second here.
Take your time, man.
Yeah. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
So and big in it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so what do we got here?
All right. Typically reported UAP characteristics and reported UA hotspots. I think that it's like a important distinction to make when you're looking at these things. These are about UAP reports, not just UAP sightings or UAP hotspots. Like, these aren't necessarily flaps taking place on this map. These are just the concentration of reports. And in fact, I think Kirkpatrick mentioned that these bright areas on the map here are where their bases are, essentially, or what some of their larger bases where they're getting a lot of the reports in.
I thought that was neat. Yeah, he mentioned several times that a lot of it is reporting bias. He mentioned how the altitude is the altitude of most air traffic, because that's where people are seeing things. And then he mentioned that a lot of the observations are near places where they have the sensor systems that enable the observation. So he's really drawing attention to that.
Yeah, it makes sense. But I think that someone could look at that and be like, oh, why are UAP drawn to these locations? You know what I mean? People could take a lot from that. And I think the way it's worded is maybe not necessarily so clear.
Yeah.
Something I'm noting. But it looks like, yeah, it was some of the other kind of numbers here is really interesting. Look at, it's a little blurry from it. 52% described as round. I would call that balloon-like entities, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Last report. 1 to 4 meters, silver, white, or translucent. I mean, are you getting like Skirmian impressions, Campbell?
I did mention that in the Discord earlier that something like that could probably resolve a lot of these. But I think you're right that almost all that would be a very rare phenomenon and has not been verified in the atmosphere. It's basically like a spin up of electromagnetic energy, kind of like a three-dimensional hurricane almost, right? It stays intact, but that would be very unlikely. I think most probably are probably balloons, I suspect.
Now, what at the bottom of this chart here in the signatures section, the thermal, and they say intermittent shortwave infrared and medium wave infrared. And do you know what this means? What they're referring to here? Leah? You get
So
your hand up. You're
they're talking.
Sorry. Yes. I was going to say they're probably talking like literally thermal signatures. So these are like the intensity of the heat or heat radiation signatures associated with these sightings.
So they're emitting these thermal signatures.
Mm-hmm.
So, but does that contradict? I mean, maybe not contradict, but no thermal exhaust, and then it says thermal.
Well, I mean, the observables, the 5 observables talk about, let me see, I'm opening them back up here. They do talk about no obvious signatures, but the thing is, like, an infrared signature is something you wouldn't be able to visually observe. You'd have to be able to be measured through instrumentation because we can't really see into the infrared spectrum. And we wouldn't be close enough to feel like a heat signature either. However, I mean, you know, there are reports, of course, that people that have close encounters that do experience burns, right? That there are these thermal signatures or, you know, the saucer nest phenomena, right? Like leaving little burn marks on the ground.
Saucer nest, yes.
Saucer nests.
There's also with the balloons. The Chinese balloons of recent fame.
Mm-hmm.
They apparently can steer themselves, but they don't have any obvious means of propulsion.
Mm-hmm.
So like that might not show up even on as like an obvious heat signature in the.
Yeah, that may be how they're able to be so stealthy, right? You just shoot them up into the. I mean, the jet stream. I mean, our predictive capabilities are imperfect, but they're quite good. Like we understand how a lot of these like atmospheric streams work. So you can, you know, depending on, I would assume, the altitude and the location from which you launch them, you can expect that they'll move in particular ways through the atmosphere and over particular places geographically.
Mm-hmm. And these hotspots, the one on the far right there, is that Korea?
It looks like South Korea to me.
Yeah, that's like a place where there's a lot of U.S. military activity and
Correct.
the South Korean military, because they're like on head trigger alert for any North Korean attack.
Mm-hmm.
And just in that general area, there's a lot of U.S. shipping as well, naval shipping, because of trying to contain China. And then in the middle there, it looks like that's the Middle East, isn't it? Or near Turkey.
Yep, Turkey and stuff. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are a bit of U.S. bases in Turkey and in that region, just under Russia there.
Yeah.
And then got our coasts.
A lot of the follow-up questions did, from the senators involved, did relate to foreign technology, specifically asking about China, and they seemed very distinctly interested in this possibility that there could be some kind of element of foreign technology invading their airspace. And Dr. Kirkpatrick specifically brought up, Senator Gillibrand mentioned that she was going to have Dr. Kirkpatrick help her draft some of the language explicitly in the next defense bill. In order to allocate resources, and that was after some questions about missing these most dangerous, very high-level possible technologies being used by like foreign adversaries on Earth. So, like they're leaving open this option of there being these like very extraordinary phenomena, but the way that they're talking about it, it's removed from the historical thing that people think of as UFOs, because these technologies that they're now saying they're looking for are possible and historically haven't been, but sort of the study of unidentified objects has sort of continued through the period into when the things that were historically inconceivable now seem like actually within the realm of possibility. So So once, like what was once absurd levels of hypothetical foreign technology advancement now are within the realm of possibility, interestingly, and it's potentially causing some things to slip through the cracks because of that taboo associated with his reporting historically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big mess, isn't it?
Seems to be.
Let's see here. Yeah, there were some interesting parts of it. I guess I can't really find this.
Hey, I think did I just steal the presentation? I think I did.
You did.
Yeah. So I pulled this up in the background. This was an image that was making the rounds on Twitter probably like 6 months ago or 5 months ago.
It comes in cycles. I've seen this a lot.
Yeah, and I just bring it up to obviously I can't speak to its origination point. I don't know who made it. I guess ESRI, whatever that is. I don't know the feeder data. But I bring this up because it's a very stark. It's not really a heat map, but it's kind of, the point is it's very stark. Look at all of North America versus the rest of the world. Nick, tell me, break me apart.
What you're saying. However, first of all, like I said, I've seen this map quite a few times, and actually the source of the information comes from the National UFO Reporting Center, national meaning.
Right, so it's America National.
And it's also, as you can see, reported UFO sightings. Now, all these dark countries, I don't know if they have UFO reporting.
This is fantastic.
Or anything, but like I said, that information is primarily coming from the US, which is why it's glowing so brightly on that map. I remember this was, I want to say it was 2 years ago, McWest retweeted this, and I was like, hey man, look where that information's coming from.
Oh, fantastic. Nick, thank you so much. No, I genuinely appreciate this context because like I said, I don't really know anything about it except that I see it kind of making the rounds on social media. So I'm going to kick this off the stream, Campbell, so you can represent what you were sharing.
But it also, that kind of speaks to what I was saying a little earlier about the graphs from the hearing too, is that it's reported UFO cases, not UFO cases. This isn't these aren't like hotspots. These aren't waves necessarily. These are just the location that the reports themselves are coming from, which, they are being directed to report this stuff now. That's kind of like the agenda of this office. So that would be why you have these glowing bases on this map of, UFO reports. That's where they're going and getting them from. So I don't know if it's really indicative of anything or if it's even that valuable information. But it's still interesting.
Yes. Very, very helpful context. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too because it's like it's about the ones that are unresolved after investigation, right? So if it's just observations, then like yes, certainly they're going to be appearing where people are. So, it's just so key to avoid like I understand the compulsion to support the opinion, right? Like it's like if there's good evidence that there are like things being observed that can't be explained. That's why this office is there, is because it's like, are these things like foreign technology? Because they are doing things that historically you haven't seen. But it's like, if you want to get at that, have to avoid these misleading things, like lead with the strongest information so that the conversation is taken seriously.
I agree. And that kind of brings me to the point that, and I kind of thought we'd talk about this a little bit more last week, but at what point do we take this? I'm used to saying ETH just because I'm older, but this kind of like notion, this idea of non-human intelligence applied to unidentified things, but not just unidentified things, specifically ones that are in the sky. We don't categorize or kind of believe that there's a unified theory between all unidentified things, just the flying things. When do we take this kind of like this NHI idea off the table? Because you were talking about earlier, Campbell, and Senator Gillibrand was also talking about the stigma that's attached to all of this. That stigma, I'm assuming, comes from the flying saucer story, right?
That's my understanding.
In this past 80 years, is there anything to even suggest that we should be taking that seriously?
Well, that's a good question.
Like, I mean, my response to that is that this is a great question, and my response to it is that it is there's an inappropriate, in my mind, connection between the material phenomena of observed UAP, UFO, etc., and also non-human intelligence. I see these as two categorically distinct inquiries. And I think that they become inappropriately and excessively linked, both popularly and a lot of people that follow the subject. I see the question of non-human intelligence as part of a larger constellation of inquiry, even into the existence of God, right? Like that's what it feels like. It's a modern artifact of this inquiry about whether or not God actually exists, or realities beyond our immediate material-based reality exist. And, you know, I am personally of the camp, right? Like we were laughing, I think we were laughing about this backstage, where I was like, oh, I even said this on this, I think on the show tonight. Like I come from the psycho-spiritual kind of Jungian perspective. Like I don't come at this from like the literal flying saucer, see stuff in the sky perspective.
Right.
And I think this proclivity to entangle these two things and treat them as one core idea actually does a disservice to the subject in a lot of critical ways, in a lot of really essential ways.
Sorry, I got completely distracted. Carlos Dangerous is asking what I was eating. It's a
What are you eating?
big bag of jelly beans.
Oh my God, dude. Nick, I love you because I get to live vicariously through all of your habits. I get to, God, you make me miss having a smoke. Haven't had one of those in about 15 years.
Oh man.
Regular soda. I haven't had a regular soda probably in about 15 years.
Oh yeah, I got a bag of jelly beans, a Pepsi, and a mug of coffee over here.
Dude, my pancreas is tingling.
We were talking, I just, you know, you hear a lot of the UFO enthusiasts who I think I can vaguely say do subscribe to a NHI flavored proclivity, right? They all want science to take it seriously, right? But what do you give a scientist that is suggestive of any kind of NHI? Like, do you give them a handful of cases? And if so, which ones? You know what I mean? Because what are they going to work with? You give them this idea that's essentially just a story we've all grown up with our entire lives. Like if you ask any kid in the States on the street what a UFO is, and they'll draw you a flying saucer. Like you said, they are just completely linked. Why are we, and like, we're really aware of that, right? Like it's been around forever. It's been about 80 years. We don't have anything substantive to link to this idea. Why are we continuing with it?
What about this idea too, though, that this, let's say this phenomenon, not in the capital T, capital P way that ufology, but like this phenomenon itself is, does not fit within our current interpretive frameworks for how we assess and measure and understand things around us. This is what I keep coming back to. Like if I'm pushed against the wall and had to give like my opinion or belief on this stuff, I would say that sort of the scientific method is very good for some things, but very limited for other things. And that to presuppose that science as we currently understand it is a useful way to measure and verify this stuff, to me feels like a long bow to draw. Like I'm not sure, like I don't think it's well suited for that. I also, dude, before we keep going, we have Jay Schenk backstage, and I would love to have him on because one, he's one of my favorite people, and also I'm sure he has a whole lot to say about this, so I'm gonna bring him on. Hey Jay.
Hey guys, I am camera off because I'm really in a major trash goblin state after being, I had like a cold for 3 weeks and then just I'm back. But can I believe in UFOs without believing the kind of dominant narrative that goes along with these hearings?
What do you mean by UFOs?
Okay. Well, like, let's say they're like, I still come back. One of the reasons I don't abandon this is the fact that people keep seeing stuff. People keep reporting stuff. People keep having experiences. But what I really don't like, what I really have an issue with kind of with the hearing thing is, first of all, we're still in this, like, for lack of a better way to put it, we're in the 80s, 90s mythos that came from really, and this what I'm about to say comes from research done in Trickster and the Paranormal, which I'm still reading through. But a lot of CIA linked sources kind of feeding into this stuff with the abductions, the alien human hybrids. I know somebody said Lou was talking about psychic super soldiers the other day. And I'm going to say I actually tonight, right now at 9:36 on the East Coast, I think that is 100% something that the CIA and the Air Force intelligence made up because they don't know on the supernatural end of it. And on the other end, somehow, like, I'm going to send Tom DeLonge. If I can get anybody has Tom DeLonge's home address, I'm going to send him all of my childhood nerd books about the SR-71 and the F-117 and Black Ops, black budget aircraft programs. So Tom can know that one of the things they engineered a lot of those things to do was not display a real heavy thermal signature. Mm-hmm. I just feel like the guys on Twitter, like UFO Twitter, is not intellectually up to this. There's like 50 books they need to read first just to get on the
you don't need to tell us this, dude.
The ground floor of it. But it's exhausting. Like I am watching the feed today and like my soul is slipping out of my ass as just like, yeah, just like, somehow I was picturing like I'm trying to psychically project myself forward in time where somebody is doing the like remember Louis Elizondo, like just like Corbell did with what's his ass? Wow, that's like I said, the brain is dying right now. They're beaming the knowledge out of my head. Yeah, Lazar. It's just like it's the same shit.
Yeah, it is.
And I honestly think this is holding us back from figuring anything out. It's like there's a giant
yes.
It's like when I look at the pie chart, I'm like, I bet those round ones that look like balloons are balloons. Like that's
old shit, right?
Let me ask you this. Do you agree with Jack Brewer when he says the stigma is earned?
Yeah, I do. I like Jack a lot. I think for some reason in this, taking it seriously ends up being kind of a death sentence for you, and doing like the Carney sideshow route ends up being, I mean, again, I will say that being like big in the UFO world is a dubious mark of distinction. Yeah. It's a real, if I was like the world's most famous ufologist, it's like being the world's tallest midget. It's just a real thing. But there's a lot of stuff on the popular end of it that I almost feel is, well, the newly formed, because I'm sort of coming out of my cold, I'm sort of black pilled and reading Trickster and Paranormal. There's a major throughout that book that the rational protects us from the dangerous manifestation of the supernatural. The supernatural erupts from ambiguity, considering this phenomenon, because it would have been considered supernatural pre-1906. Talking, seeing stuff flying in the sky, pre it being like the Germans in the airship flying over England. Like,
yeah, I was going to ask you what happens in 1906. Is it the Zeppelins?
There's a lot. I actually do have. I picked up a book about. I love that stuff. Like, I love the airship sightings. I don't know why. I picked this book up just because it's basically it's the Red Baron in his Fokker triplane. Like it looks like he's like pulling up and about to engage a Adamansky type
Is it Snoopy
saucer.
as the Red Baron?
What's that?
I said, is it Snoopy as the Red Baron?
No, it's like it's Manfred von Richthofen as the Red Baron. Like, although Snoopy, Snoopy is also good, but I'm like, now I would watch that movie if it was. They would try to if they would try another like an Iron Skies prequel or something. But there's a level of me that actually does think that this sort of exists in place to keep us from confronting the truth that. Well, there's two bad truths. The truth is that in the last like post-Cold War era, a lot of our competitor nations have caught up with us and can pull off some of the stuff that we could do in the 60s with weird hypersonics and stuff. And there's also like the horrible supernatural truth that no one knows what the really weird stuff is.
And Jay, do you think genuinely that the government, the way that they present this, saying sort of like, we're on the same page as you guys, and we're just getting NASA to take a look now to start with, and we'll see what they have to say. Do you think that's genuine, or do you think that there is an underlying knowledge there?
I think that there's an underlying knowledge of adversary nations operating in our airspace, or that, again, because this stuff was so highly compartmentalized, like we could be testing things that, Kristen Gillibrand is not up on all the stuff. Like the average USAF, even like an interceptor pilot being scrambled to intercept a balloon is not like, he does not know every single aircraft, drone system, weapon system that is in our inventory. So I think it's a little of both. Like I think they know some stuff, and this is it's a very reasonable approach. And because it's reasonable, it's kind of a calming thing. It's like, there's some stuff we don't know. And I think that's good enough for most people.
I got distracted by a comment. Brook 2 himself says, we have definitive statistical proof of telepathy and even information picked up via mediums and remote viewing, and yet that also has a stigma and is rejected by mainstream. Sorry, you're wrong. What? I'm not aware of any definitive statistical proof of telepathy or remote viewing.
Yeah, that exists.
I would really like to hear about that, though, if you want to call in.
It is genuinely, like, I would tell you, check out the easy access book is check out Dean Radin's book, Real Magic.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with Radin a little bit.
Radin talks about that. Here's what I would say about this. The statistical proof is sort of, it is statistical proof. I think two things have happened with this. First of all, again, Trickster in the Paranormal really talks about this stigma and this rejection, like the rejection of the paranormal from a sociological standpoint as societies move from being governed by like an individual charismatic leader to a govern kind of what we have now with a bureaucratic structure. And thoughts of the supernatural have to be discarded to hit the state where you have like a regular kind of normal bureaucratic society. The other thing is, and I hate to say this because I think it's fascinating, it's not good for anything. Like nobody has been able to take the fact that there is a statistical proof of telepathy and be like, you can train for telepathy. We are right. It's replicable. The problem with a lot of, and this is again goes to stuff that Hansen documents in Trickster, is there's a degree of social structure that is more allowable in the paranormal. It seems that the Trickster element is that it seems to elude being turned into a scientifically replicable and repeatable process. And I think that's to some extent that's why it just doesn't go anywhere.
Well,
Jay,
yeah.
one of the things I actually was just pulling up my notes. Also, sorry for the interlude there. I knocked over my tea and had to like rush around and clean up. But I know I'm a hot mess tonight. Jay, I think of the question that you sent me when I was speaking with Dr. Jeff Kripal around in The Trickster and the Paranormal. I'm just going to read it. In The Trickster and the Paranormal, Gregory Hansen's analysis about anti-structure argues that societies move towards not having room for spiritual experience. And that also came to mind sort of in this conversation, this idea that like we are increasingly moving towards a human experience that does not have the space for the mysterious, right? Not necessarily even the spiritual, but that it's sort of closing in on any of these mysterious or numinous experiences that have otherwise, been pretty common throughout human history.
I mean, that's a large part, documented part of his research, that he views that as part of the phenomena of demystifying society. But he views it as sort of a natural process as society just advances to being a larger, like we have to have rules, and as that bureaucratic society goes forward, I think that's why you see responses like NASA's response, which is just like, well, we're going to check it out. I think either response, this is a little bit of a classic thing. You don't want to know that the Chinese are peeking at you necessarily. That seems to really upset a lot of people, although, I don't really know. My life is now too boring to really care about that too much, but, or you don't want the government can't tell you they don't know what's going on. Like totally. Yeah. Like it's like, we really don't know. Like this defies a rational explanation.
Right. I'd love to, sorry. Can I comment on this?
Go ahead, Campbell, please.
Okay, thank you. Just from the previous thing, I wanted to comment on the statistical evidence for telepathy, because this is something I found quite interesting. I saw a tweet by one of the spokespeople for the CIA database at one point. It was like several months ago, and they were sort of promoting the fact that they put a bunch of documents on there, and they included reference to the CIA report that found, every time we do a psychic study, we find a statistical percentage, a few percentage points that defy, an explanation other than some kind of effect. However, we can't weaponize. We can't figure out how to weaponize it effectively. When I saw that, I was like, well, that's interesting. I assume that if there was a verifiable effect, it would be looked at in the public realm, and of course, it has been. There have been actually several, there were like a dozen studies that replicated that effect over and over again in the 2000s. The researcher's name is eluding me right now, but the most interesting part here is that in the scientific community, they haven't accepted that telepathy exists. What has happened is that dozens upon dozens of peer-reviewed papers have been published in response, describing how a tiny effect can be produced consistently that is not produced in the actual study itself in the social sciences. And it's actually led to a huge amount of focused attention on how to try to look back on the history of social sciences and correct for the fact that studies in that field can produce an effect that does not appear to actually be fundamentally real. Now, that doesn't mean that that's true, but that is the way that the field has interpreted those results. So I just wanted to clarify that for any scientists listening in and pulling out their hair.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. One of the comments was Gene Radin has multiple meta-studies. Attention affects about 3% on dice. Now, how are you determining the causal relationship between whatever these people are claiming they're doing and the dice? How do you know, and this is a joke, but how do you know like a poltergeist isn't, an invisible poltergeist in the room isn't affecting the dice and rather than the test subject, things like that. I'd really like to see all these studies, and it sounds like Brooke to himself knows about a lot of them. So if you want to hit me up after the show or like link some of these things, because I'm super interested.
Yeah, this is super fascinating.
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time digging through a lot of the global consciousness studies as well,
Mhm.
which were out of the Princeton, the Pear Lab.
Is that the
Super
one with
fascinating stuff.
the little eggs,
The
little random
eggs.
number generators?
Yeah, eggs. And have some, look, I have enough background in statistics. I spent some time with some of these papers just kind of like pressure testing their approaches, and they seem pretty interesting, right? Like
Yeah.
they seem interesting. I don't know, I don't feel comfortable conferring, oh yeah, this is definitely legit, but it was interesting enough that I'd say it's worth exploring further, right? Just like I
Yes.
think the work by Ryan at Duke is worth exploring further.
I love all that stuff too.
Yeah, me too.
And don't misunderstand that I'm trying to say that I'm the arbiter of whether or not these are bullshit or not. I am like personally interested in them too. So hopefully it didn't sound like I was trying to like sit on you in the chat or anything.
But a lot of the stuff that they've done with the experiments was trying to figure out who was doing what where. Like one of them was the actual, like, if I'm conducting an experiment, is it my psi ability affecting my students' results or my test subjects' results? Not my test subjects doing it. But I think it doesn't. Like Henry Rollins said, can it get me laid? Can I sell it on eBay? The answer to both of those is no. So it's not something that we're seeing. Like, you can't buy a Samsung product.
Or can we use it to bomb brown people? That's sort of the question. Yeah.
And I want to point out too, like, just to reiterate that the CIA themselves, in their internal documents, concluded that the psychic phenomena was real. And it was only, decades later in the public realm with the peer review and then the other scientists coming in and sort of being like, well, I think it's this, that observation that there's always this statistical anomaly, the interpretation being a flaw in the way that the studies are done, or any other, actual psychic phenomena or whatever. So the observation is 100%. The interpretation is, reasonably subject to debate.
This reminds me, something we talked about maybe a couple months ago is doing an on-air Zener card test with all the crew here, and I still want to do that at some point.
We definitely
Another
should.
time, but
I'm really interested in Zener cards. I once did them on a first date with someone, and we just got drunker and drunker over the course of the night and played with the Zener cards.
Could you explain what are those actually? Could you explain that to me?
1 second, I'll go get them.
You have.
But the other circumstance where I think it'd be fascinating is in any kind of transpersonal situation, like whether it's a ketamine experience, psychedelic experience, or holotropic breathwork, or even social noting or like group meditation. I think like that plus Zener cards would be really fascinating to dig into.
I think Liminal Earth is doing the Philip experiment tonight too on their live stream.
Oh yeah, so Liminal, talk about this because it's happening at 11 o'clock, right?
Yeah, it's happening at 11 o'clock. Liminal Earth are doing the Philip experiment, which, if you're not familiar with the Philip experiment, it was basically we're going to will a ghost into existence. We're going to create a personality and manifest it, even though it is not conforming to the. The Philip experiment was where it's a ghost and it's not conforming. It's not conforming to some dead person. We're just kind of like Twitter likes to make up a dude to get mad at. They're just making up a dude and trying to talk to them.
Yeah, egregores. It's funny. Brooke is commenting on this too right now. That's the case he looked into, conjuring Philip. They created a fake person living in a castle and conjured it using old school medium techniques.
I feel like Taps does that on TV a lot too. Same with the people at Skinwalker Ranch.
One of the things on a lot of this stuff, I also feel like we sort of need to disabuse the idea that we're all rational and making rational decisions on this, and like talking about things like why isn't the psi research more well known? People really seem to tie belief to their identity, and I think you see that, like, you have an absolute belief in rationalism that lives in academia that, I mean, I even remember just talking to a guy, a friend of mine, who's a physics major, and I was trying, I'm a humanities person, and I was trying to get like, well, you can't mathematically determine like what the best song in the world is. And he was really like having like, I like accidentally Joe just it's like might fuck around and accidentally induce a ideological crisis in your homeboy. Because he was like, no, like there has to be, and if there's not, none of this matters. And I'm like, whoa, bud. Okay, well, go you. But just again, like I said on, I think the last time I was here, like, on the other hand, dudes are horny for UFOs. Like, dudes need the X-Files mythos to be real. And that whole thing needs to be treated on because they really sunk a lot of who they are into that.
Yeah.
Yeah, people's
And that just governs a lot of, I just think it governs a lot of decision making.
Yes, it does. And it also precludes, to me, like complex or nuanced thinking around the subject, right? This is you could basically talk about the criticism of trained observers that we opened the show with as an example of this. Like any kind of criticism or pushback on the fallibility of human trained observers is frequently transmuted into a direct personal attack on UFOs.
Yeah, the trained observer thing is interesting because I know the Astonishing Legends podcast guys listen to that a lot, or they mention that a lot. And, one of the things, I former pilot, I am technically a trained observer. All really I am trained for is to see stuff that is also in the sky. And my number one judgment is, am I on a collision course with it or not? And once that's a real binary, just nope, we're not, or yup, we are. And then and it's like, you either have to move or you don't. Popular item, you can get this, you ever go to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, which is highly worthwhile because you can see a ton of X-planes up close. You can get aircraft identification cards to identify what's what. This happened. They introduced these in the Second World War, to attack plane cards with the silhouettes of allied and adversary aircraft on them, so you can train yourself to quickly identify that silhouette. But that's different. I don't. It's like, okay, there's another small plane in the air with me. It's like, is that a Beechcraft or a Piper? It's like, I don't know. We're also both flying at 140 knots per hour. So, when you add that up, our closure rates on each other are pretty fast. And it's like, I don't know. There's another low wind or fixed gear. I don't know. Moving on. So I think a lot of the, I'm going to go back to this, and I hate to say this because the real, guys, the real meta conspiracy behind all of this somewhere is publishers and booksellers just getting us to buy all this stuff to read. But again, I think, I just merch. That's the real conspiracy. But I think if people would diffuse some of the hostility if they got into the granular details a little bit, could just divorce themselves from the mythos, because the mythos is fun, but actually the details are fun too.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
So circling back, Nick, are you ready to talk about Zener cards? I see you're shuffling them.
Oh yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you know the 5 shapes?
I do not. So
I do.
please.
Oh, I do. Positive lift, transmedium travel.
No.
Low absorbability.
No. We've got square, star, circle, plus sign, and the bacon one.
Oh yeah, those squiggle lines.
The bacon.
Dr. Peter Venkman says a bunch of wavy lines.
That's how most people know of Zener cards, is from from Ghostbusters. But these were produced back in Duke by Carl Zener, I think, for J.B. Ryan, I believe. Actually, a lot of the studies that were done using these, it was found out after the fact that the cards were kind of translucent, and a lot of the subjects could see right through them. But for everybody getting a good psychic hit on this.
Yes.
Star.
You got a star. Leah?
I said star.
A star, Campbell?
I feel star as well.
Luis, you're muted.
You're muted.
Circle.
Luis is psychic.
Oh,
Proved it right here on
Luis.
air.
And I don't even believe
Got the
it.
touch.
Neither do I. But I am interested in it. So yeah, Brooke, please hit me up somehow. I'm not on Twitter anymore, of course, but
What happened to you on Twitter?
dude, I can't. It's too stupid.
I feel it. It gets worse.
This is a move.
It gets worse every day, but I'm still. You missed like I'm still hanging on because like Christian fascist Matt Walsh's Twitter got hacked the other day, and it was like genuinely hilarious.
That's amazing.
I is a stochastic terrorist and a problem. But no, I don't want to deny that there was no value in UFO Twitter. I mean, it's how I met a lot of you. It's how I made a lot of connections in this field. I know a ton of cool people now because of it. But I reached the point where like I've met everybody I'm going to meet through that. It's kind of filled its purpose. So I'm just kind of done with it right now. The only purpose it served was to get into fights, which is fun sometimes. But just I don't know. It's too hard to keep up with that and everything else going on. So I had to bail.
Weird Twitter's vibe is way better than UFO Twitter. I'm trying to slowly kind of migrate into that space. Yeah, that's like where Jay's from. That's where Vanessa's from.
See, I saw because I follow. Jay was probably one of my first follows on Twitter a couple years
That's how I found Jay, was through you, dude. I saw you guys going back and forth on memes, and I was like, this guy posts A+ content.
See, I wanted to kind of like dip back into that kind of whole paranormal stuff, like less UFO, more ESP stuff, or even ghosts. I still love ghosts.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I couldn't kind of breach into that community. Maybe I'll try again someday when I have time.
We're having a picnic in July.
That sounds nice.
Yeah. There are nice people there. There are some bad people there, but it's kind of like I feel like a lot of them either quit or got pushed to the margins. But I think with UFO Twitter, some people are like, there's some people that are both like really need a diagnosis, who are LARPing that I think people do get sucked into that, like dudes that think they're secret agents or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little intense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of that collective, I don't want to say collective mental illness, but it's sort of like lots of people with very bad ideas just kind of huffing each other's farts, to be extremely crude.
They do have a form of hive mind, and that hive mind might have a mental illness.
Yeah, like it's folio de, right? Like it's sort of this like collective madness or this collective tilt that they tend, like not only tend to create and like churn constantly, but also are deeply, deeply protective of. Again, this goes back to this idea of the egoic identity being really tied up in UFOs, where any kind of pushback or inquiry or interrogation of their claims or their behaviors is basically treated as a direct personal attack. Whenever I witness this, and of course UFO Twitter particularly is rife with it, like I'm immediately always curious about how these people actually function in real life. Are they actually this dysfunctional? Like how do they maintain any sort of semblance of normal human behavior? Or is Twitter just happens to be this outlet where they get to be completely crazy?
I mean, personally, yeah, it is, because, days that I'm frustrated, I would vent on Twitter. I would pick UFO fights. Literally, just to vent, because I enjoyed it, and that's
when you said that though. UFO fights, I was literally picturing some kind of claymation show like MTV's Old Celebrity Deathmatch, where I would, if they brought that format back with UFO personalities, I would watch that.
That was a Jeopardy answer tonight. Celebrity Deathmatch. You know what? Actually, there's a dude on Twitter, and the name is escaping me. He's a big believer. I think he's like really into Lou, but he sculpted a sculpture of Lou, and it was really good. So like there's people with talent out there. Jay. So I mean,
Yeah.
I wish I could remember the person's name. I think they have a YouTube channel too, and they make kind of like little UFO documentaries and stuff. But sculpting, they're awesome. He broke down the process of how he made it and stuff. It was really impressive.
Cool.
I think the one thing, I mean, a lot of those people, like, I also want to say this, like, a lot of them, I would have been one of those people if the internet would have been what it was when I was like 17 to 25.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
Yes.
like NAP and the S4 saucer, I mean, like, I did art when I was in school about the S4 saucer. Like,
Yeah.
I was 100% down that rabbit hole then. I mean, a lot of my take now is because I literally lived through the cycle of it, where that's what I said, you know, in like an aging Jeremy Corbell doing a documentary, like, where is Lua Elizondo now? Like, remember all that shit that happened 20 years ago? Because, like, and this is why I feel bad, because, again, I want to emphasize it. Like, I really did think we were on the verge of some kind of disclosure moment, and all the fiction was priming us to, you know, we're going to loosen our minds up for this. And then, you know, everybody, it's like you got UFO blueballed, and it's just going to happen again.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this always reminds me of like conversations about disclosure. Like, one is, even in the best case scenario, disclosure feels to me like an emergent process, right? It's not going to be just a discrete event. But the other thing too, this goes back to things I've said many times on this show. I certainly don't trust the government or any sort of institutional authority figure to be the place that is spearheading disclosure in any meaningful sense.
The people that are covering it up.
Yeah.
I'm
Also, there's a
concerned.
very long history of the government and government actors either actively disrupting or infiltrating these kinds of spaces and using them for mis and disinformation campaigns. Or, I mean, you don't actually have to be, dude, you don't have to be like a conspiracy theorist to understand and recognize that there's a long and storied history of the US government acting in deeply harmful ways towards its own citizens. Through these venues. And to me, it also feels like ufology, or kind of a lot of the ufological spaces, are basically proving grounds for a lot of this behavior.
I think what bothers me about it is two things. The first being that it is a little, I don't think anybody realizes kind of how flexible they're being. We're saying, like, I don't believe anything the government says, except we're going to twist their arm to get them to finally tell the truth this one time, for sure. Like, disclosure happens. It's like, okay, this is really it. It's like, what, you pinky swear? And I know we've talked about this before. You really, like, there's an idea that, I don't know what it is. It reminds me of the original Far Side cartoon where, you know, professor types, the lab coat guys, are drawing this massive equation, and then they get to the middle of it, and it says, then the miracle occurs. And the rest of it goes back. So disclosure is a little bit like, then the miracle occurs, because it seems like people are willing to compromise a lot of values in the face of, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter if I go on, like, the worst news network on the world, as long as disclosure happens. Or, you know, it doesn't matter how bad this politician is, because he's behind us on this. But I want to circle all the way back and say, none of this to me says that aliens aren't real and never visited the planet Earth, because there are some actually truly strange cases, but I think those are more of the edge cases, and the X-Files mythos that we're still attempting to live keeps us distracted from taking a good look at anything else.
Yeah, well, yeah, wise words, Jay. I agree entirely. And I'd just like to say we have somebody else in the back here, Telesma Blorb, who is actually, I think, is that next week that she's coming up?
Yeah.
So here I'll add now.
Wow, 6 of us.
Yeah.
It's basically a party now.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
How are you tonight?
I'm doing okay. Just enjoying the show. I don't really follow all this stuff, so all of this information about Arrow I'm getting from listening to other people who have processed it, because I just would rather just not.
I barely follow it myself. So.
What's that?
Well, from you say he didn't follow it himself. What's your interpretation then? If you're sort of just collecting all the information from the ether, what's your take?
I mean, it just sounds like the same stuff. You know, it doesn't sound like any new information. That's the thing. Like, if I had my choice, I would just read about, like, you know, the electromagnetic anomalies of the Earth and, like, fairy lore and crap. You know, I would never. I don't want to know the name Brian Bugle. I don't want to know any about that.
Understandable completely. Yeah, I mean, is this kind of the general consensus across everybody then, that this hearing was just kind of like nothing?
Well, I mean, it's kind of nothing, but to me, it also feels like this. You know, what I keep coming back to is that this is more national security narratives that are just being packaged and repackaged in new and innovative ways, right? And to me, that's sort of what this feels like intuitively.
Yeah.
Is it's just more I mean, even if you look at the lobbying group, right, the one that Ryan Graves runs, isn't it called like Citizens for Safe Aerospace or something like that? Like, it's typically, well, it's like it feels like a lot of these narratives, especially at the government/military level, are couched very deeply in these narratives around national security and protection, which I think for the average person, like not a UFO person, but the average person, that's basically like the red menace, which could be either Russia or China, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, I think my concern about all of this, like, is that, you know, there's this clear, you know, very unified sort of UFO party, right? Like, big UFO, and it's a very cohesive, organized movement, and it's a religious movement, but it's one where large portions of the movement don't realize they're in a religion because it doesn't have a name. You know, they think that's just reality because they're being tricked. You know, and so the lobbyists, the UFO lobbyists like Leslie Kean, that's a total conflict of interest to the U.S. You know, it's a breach of separation of church and state. You know what I mean?
That's a spicy take. I kind of like it.
Oh boy.
It's speculative. I'm speculating.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the culture of the religion, if we want to take a look at it that way. I mean, it's not organized, obviously, but it is a set of beliefs that you know, could be argued to have a structure of a sort. If you look at it, you know, when I started looking at UFOs in 2021 for the first time, it was within the virus. You know, my brain was open to new information because of the trauma of that whole thing. That's how trauma works. It opens your brain to new info. I was like, okay, I'll take a look at this. That would be funny if none of this really, like, if the aliens are here, that would be kind of hilarious. So, you know, and it's like, this might change things up. That might be cool. So, you know, I understand there's like people like talk about disclosure. It's like, it's about it being like this huge thing that changes the world. Like, that's sort of like the core thing here, right? Like, that a lot of these people grab onto, and it's like, it kind of excuses a lot of things. It's like, if the aliens are here and they can bring in these advanced technologies that'll change the world, then what is unjustifiable? What is justifiable, right? Like, it goes pretty far. So, like, like Jay and Telesma, like each of you, maybe Telesma, if you could answer first, like, is there something that you identified that brought you into this initially, like looking at these sort of things on the edge? Like, what brought you in?
Well, you mean just like the anomalous and like the paranormal in general, like strangeness?
Yes.
Well, I've really been interested in it since I was very young. And you know, some of my earliest memory, I have a very early memory of being in a library in New Jersey and looking on, like, you know, like one of those old like Macs or something, like a really old computer.
With the clear backs.
The green pixels, like way back in the 80s. This is like in the late 80s.
Oh, hell
This
yeah.
is like a Lisa. Yeah,
What's
Nick
that?
is pointing. Nick has one of these. I think these were called
Yes.
Lisas. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, the Lisa.
that's how Nick talks to his internet girlfriends on that thing. Dials into the local BBS. Yeah. Yeah.
This causes
Yeah, but I'm looking for information about the Jersey Devil. I was at that age very obsessed with the Jersey Devil and the Loch Ness Monster. I was probably 5 years old, and I got into UFOs a few years after that. I think I remember having vivid dreams of like giant squid and plesiosaurs and stuff like that. So it's been a fixation pretty much my entire life for as long as I remember.
I mean, this subject is like everyone's lifetime affliction, right? Like I'm sitting in my office right now and I have a drawing that I did of an alien when I was in 2nd grade, right? That my mom found when she was cleaning our basement and was like, "See, Leah, you never changed." And it's so
that
true.
accessible? Are you able to
Yeah,
present
you
that
want to
us?
see it? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to see that, please. It's funny, Jay, you were talking about being into this in school. I remember I want to say it was 7th grade in tech ed, we did screen printing, and I remember screen printing one of the sketches of an alien gray out of Bud Hopkins' Intruders, which I checked out from the school library, that very school. So yeah, it's been
This is
home.
it, guys.
Oh.
I almost wound up at art school too. So
I can
this
tell.
is 7-year-old Leah, right?
In your portfolio.
It's pretty dope.
That's
Yeah.
a really good drawing.
Mail it into RISD when I was applying to their.
That's
finance
very
program.
cool.
I think your mom just drew it and like told you that you drew it, so you would confabulate the memory.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
I want to hear
Oh,
Jay's answer.
Another
No,
quick aside.
Let me unmute him.
Oh, sorry.
Go
What's
ahead,
going
Nick.
on? Was I
Yeah.
muted?
No, I muted Jay.
Oh,
But he's unmuted now. He can
Okay.
talk.
Unleashed. Actually, yeah, a lot of that stuff. So I am a child of the '80s, and I think a lot of the stuff you remember, like the '70s was really like the era where all that stuff peaked, and there were so many books published about it. Just even if they were trash, like miscellaneous books about there's Bertlett's Bermuda Triangle. There were a couple. UFO books. There was a lot of that stuff around, and I just remember soaking it up in like school libraries. I think, like even my parents, who are just like very normal people, had some of that stuff because it was like '70s. You couldn't. How could you? Yeah, and it sounds like Plasma is sort of the same. It's like we're of the spontaneous combustion generation.
yes. Whatever happened to that?
Right. And I thought that was going to be a much more dire thing I'd have to face as I'm moving into adulthood. But yeah, all that stuff imprinted on me. But I do think, some of us are just kind of cut from that cloth because, like, I want like the weird everything. Like, if you were like, here are 2 pens, it's like the standard Bic pen, or this pen is weird. I'm like, give me the weird pen.
Yep.
And that's just my personal polarity towards that stuff.
Brooke to himself. Can I? Did that actually happen, or is that a joke? You told.
What's that?
Yeah. Brooke,
no, I'm
Brooke made a
talking-
comment, quote, "I told my brother that my parents were lizards and took their faces off at night, and I wasn't allowed to talk aliens after that." Right. Yeah, you probably scared your little brother so much that your parents were like, "Brooke, you little shit. No more."
But I also remember being really young and wondering if the rest of the like world was there when I wasn't looking.
That's
Oh yeah,
understandable.
I can remember thinking that when I was very young. I've always had this preoccupation with the very strange and the weird. Jay, when you said if I had 2 equal things and one was weird and one was normal, I'm the same way. I'd always pick the weird thing. And I am from a family that is normie beyond normie, right? I am like even my extended family, and God bless my parents who are super supportive of how deeply fucking weird I can be. But it does feel almost like a baked-in personality trait or disposition, because I feel like so many people that I talk to in and around these spaces will have very similar narratives, right? These are preoccupations that have been with them since they were kids. And I mean, I like, look, I'm super open about this. I pretty regularly engage with and have had experiences that have fundamentally disrupted and broken down my ontologies, right? Like I've had ego dissolving and ego death experiences. I've deliberately sought these things out, like deliberately sought out things that will fracture and refactor my perception of the world and my experience of reality. I have this huge appetite for it. And I think it's just something, these kinds of experiences, I love them and find not only satisfaction in meeting in them, but just find sort of this adventurous experience really kind of gratifying. But there are also things that if you don't want them and you don't have that appetite, they're deeply traumatic and really harmful and upsetting. And I don't just mean psychedelics. I mean, even like spiritual emergence, meditation sessions, like deep meditation can cause like really deleterious effects in some people, can lead to dissociation, manic episodes, psychosis, things like that. And I do just think it's something that can be like basically innate, like woven into somebody's disposition.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And I think a major problem in our culture personally is that, and especially around like woo and UFO culture, is this idea that ontological shock is something, I think that people make it a lot scarier than it actually is. For me, I was just writing about this yesterday. Like, I seek out ontological shock as well, not exactly the same kind that you're talking about, but I mean, it's still ontological shock. And I think, ontological shock is a good thing because we live in a universe that's always changing all the time, and we're not static objects. We are dynamic systems. And like, I think people have become very vulnerable because they're afraid, they kind of start getting the protective or authoritarian mindsets of being like, well, this has to be true, or they look to mystery and they place a picture on it, an illustration of Jesus, basically. And so when an ontological shock happens, it makes it so much worse for them. It makes them vulnerable to that.
I think too, with a lot of these experiences, I mean, like collectively as a culture or society, we tend to assign value judgments to them, right? It is an either or situation, not a both and, right? You can have these very strange and mysterious experiences, and you are therefore pathologized into having something wrong with you. Or opinions or views that cannot or should not be trusted. And you see a lot of this with like spiritual emergence and then people being diagnosed as manic and being medicated. Now, this does not mean that medication is bad. It doesn't mean it's not helpful or useful, that pathologies should be dismissed. But there are many different processes and pathways towards wholeness when people experience these things. And I think, I think part of this proclivity towards pathologizing these kinds of things is basically because they are directly contrary to, frankly, capitalism, right? They make you shitty workers. They make you less inclined towards hypermaterialism or productivity. And so much of our kind of mental health apparatus is not really focused on a holistic approach towards integration and wholeness, but rather on just getting you up and working again, writing your JavaScript or slinging plates at a restaurant or whatever. If I'm going to pull back the curtain a lot, one of my personally held beliefs is that we live in a culture that is so hungry for meaning and sense making and even experience of the mysterious that these desires become transmuted into like basically an illness socially and culturally because we have such poor narratives for exploring it in our present moment. And when you do explore it, it can be highly stigmatized or ostracizing, or lead to you just being like, inappropriately interpreting and contextualizing these events.
You see that. I'm going to say this a little bit in defense of not wanting to have an ontological shock, but it's what you said. It's like, I don't have time for that, man. I think two of my favorite memes that I see, UFO memes going around, are it's Fox Mulder's poster, except it says, "I want to leave." I love
Yes,
that one.
it
And
was-
Wojaks, where there's like, the burner, like the burnout Wojak, is the guy with the cap who smokes, and there's a gray, and the gray says, aren't you shocked? And the burnout Wojak is just like, hey man, I got a lot going on lately. That is how I feel like right now.
Yes,
Just the
yes.
the amount of stuff that's gone on with me that's mundane. It's like if I had an ontological shock tonight, I'd be like, it's like Coach. It's like,
I
walk it
can't
off.
deal with this.
15
Yeah.
minutes, walk it off. Because it's like I gotta take my mom's car to the body shop. I got work. Like, yeah, there's not really a framework to process those in a healthy way.
I love
Yeah,
this
well-
comment from Zumog here. Gnosis is inconvenient to the establishment. That is the truest fucking thing.
Yeah, I think like disclosure and apocalypse, right? People have this conception that it's going to be this single great historical event, or like, oh, I'm going to learn about non-human intelligence because I'm going to see like a giant flying saucer in the sky or something. I think that really the way that people actually reshape their minds is not generally in big steps, and it's really in very small incremental steps, most of the time, not all the time, of course. But for me, ontological shock, I don't know where I'm going. Sorry.
That's
Let me hold for a
okay.
minute.
You can finish that thought next week, right?
Yes, yeah, you're coming back next
course.
week.
Or even what I said, I was joking with Leah on Twitter. I'm like, aliens can abduct me tonight as long as they don't wait till Saturday to drop me off. Because I just got, if I could just kind of blank on the next 2 days, that would be sweet. And that's kind of what I feel like that's modern life in a nutshell.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
So-
I agree. I think I was going off in like a different direction, kind of, and I don't know what happened. Don't worry, y'all. I'll be much better prepared next week.
Right on. So we're actually going to get wrapping things up here at the bottom of the hour. I have a very, very important date at 11, so I need to go get my car and get going. But Telesma, can't wait to have you on next week. Jay, friend of the pod, friend of the show, basically at this point, faculty on INS nearly. Love having both of you on and contributing. Really insightful conversation. I'm going to boot both of you guys off the stream, and then INS will say our good nights.
Thanks both of you for coming
Right.
on.
Yeah, this was fun. I love these conversations, and I honestly love and appreciate the crossover into a lot of the high strangeness and weird stuff.
Also
getting
appreciate
outside
all the chat.
UFO universe.
Chime in too. Lots of cool stuff in there. I
Yes.
want to say before we go that I just had a lemon and a black licorice at the same time. Super sick. Not a good time.
Not super sick, like gnarly and awesome, but
No,
like
it's
super
not.
sick, like
It's
gross.
heinous and
And now you're gonna go have a cigarette,
Gross.
man. That is like delicious,
Peak experience.
incredible.
So what's going on next week again?
We have Telesma on next week.
Cool.
After that, TBD. We have Rob from Our Strange Skies joining us in mid-May. Super excited about that.
That'll be cool.
Certainly, if anyone, any audience members, listeners, viewers, whatever, if any of you have suggestions on guests or subjects you'd like us to cover, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My DMs are open. Or you can join us on Discord. There's a link in the show description. We'd love to have you. We have a public Discord. Always welcome new joiners and thoughts. Before we sign off for the night, any parting words from you gentlemen?
Well, it's neat that there was the first congressional hearing on UFOs in 40 years. That was kind of cool today, right? Like,
I think we had a couple last year, didn't we? We had one in January.
It was the first public hearing or some crap, right? Like it said something. There was some distinction in the headline that I read that made me think it mattered. Okay, don't take this away from me.
Who? Remember when we said INS wouldn't talk UFOs anymore? Glad that didn't last. Who said that?
I don't think anyone said that.
Never
We're definitely going to continue talking UFOs. They're kind of our bread and butter, but
Mhm.
we also have appetites for stuff well outside the UFO subject, I think.
Mhm.
So,
Like assorted jelly beans.
yeah.
Quick,
jelly
Luis,
beans.
what am I thinking right now?
Oh, he's muted.
You're
We
muted.
need to unmute him.
You should be able to tell us what he's thinking.
I don't know what
Still
he's
muted.
thinking. He's psychic.
He has to unmute himself. I can't do it for him. Come on, Luis.
What was I thinking?
You're thinking about circles.
I was thinking about a bunch of grapes. So yes, that's correct. That's 2 for 2.
That's
Wow.
close enough.
Wow, it's basically a remote viewer right here. Incredible.
Yep. But I don't believe in that stuff.
That
Better
seems
smart
to be
because,
critical for success.
Yeah.
Very strange.
Yes.
Yeah, a bunch of little circles. All right, that's all for
On
me.
that note,
I don't have anything
yes,
else.
we will see you here next Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. Can't wait. Have a nice night all.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.